the other male voice that we hear that asks Ms. questions of Ms. Eam, is that the Detective Karen that you spoke of?
Yes, it's Detective Karen.
And in relation to, was there a dog in the house?
Yes, sir.
Are we able to hear the dog on the recording?
Yes.
And what do we hear on the recording from the dog?
Barking initially when I come to the door, while we're inside the residence, some moaning and whining, actually better description of whining.
That one gray noise that we heard, that was the dog, not Ms. Eam.
That's correct.
Now, in regards to the initial questions of Ms. Eam's welfare, were those genuine questions you were asking of Ms. Eam?
Yes.
And was that based on any conversation you'd had with any of the witnesses? Was that based on your conversation with her parents? Without going into what they said, but was that based on your contact with her parents?
It was partly because of that.
When you speak to her about the circumstances, at this point in your investigation, you're talking to her to see if she the text messages you said that you had read about James breaking out with her. Is that what you reviewed and confirmed within the states 128 through 137?
That is basically the gist of all that dialogue.
And when you asked her about that, was what you referred to earlier in your testimony, was that what you were referring to when you were talking about the messages of James?
Yes.
In regards to the conversation you had with her about her own welfare and making sure that she's not a threat to herself, were those genuine questions and statements that you had of Ms. Eam?
Yes, ma'am.
Was that an interview tactic, or were you genuinely concerned about the welfare of Ms. Eam?
I'm genuinely concerned.
In regards to, there's one point, and because it's audio, that you talked to Ms. Eam about the stab motion. Does she visually demonstrate to you a stab motion when you see it?
I'd like to say I recall, but I don't.
In relation to speaking to her, the part where she asked for an attorney, based on your knowledge and training and experience, did you believe that she was entitled to an attorney when you were speaking?
Objection asked and answered, and calls for a legal conclusion.
Suspending this as
In relation to, once the interview concludes, do you then go back to the police department and do you arrest her or detain her that evening?
she was not arrested or detained that evening. No.
I want to ask you about some additional parts of your investigation. Did you, the shirt that we hear reference of on the statement, did you collect that, place it in the evidence, same way we talked about before?
Yes.
Now, my first one.
Yes.
And 143 is about the clothing that you collected from the scene that we hear referenced on the tape.
It's the bag that I wrote with my handwriting that describes long sleeve shirt.
And then in regards to the long sleeve shirt and jeans, you also have a with DLS. What does that mean?
Bud-like substance.
And on the outside of the bag, does does it have all the same identifying information, case number, location of incident, suspect's name, victim's name, all of that corresponds to the investigation
It has all the above.
on the outside?
Yes.
And in regards to the inside, just going to corner to that. And within that bag is the items wrapped in additional material, then also containing there. Is that the information that you used of Montgomery County bag before placing it down?
Yes, because the detective on scene, Karen, actually took possession of it when I was with him. We put it in those bags, handed those bags to me, and then I placed it in our own evidence.
And so you can see Karen's identifying information on this bag as well.
Yes.
So these are the clothing, the jeans and the shirt with blood-like substance that you collected from this.
Yes.
This time, state would move into evidence, state 143.
Without objection.
It's 143.
Yes.
143 in evidence without objection.
Now, in regards to the investigation, you make reference as to where the defendant was traveling, make some reference to the city and her route of travel. In this case, did you actually collect some tax records as well in relation to Ms. Eam and her vehicle?
No objection, some pass records and ATM records. Without objection.
What numbers are those?
First, Sun Pass records in states 140.
And that's being offered at this time without objection?
Correct.
140 in evidence without objection.
As well as, I believe, without objection, the Bank of America records, which will be 141.
Again, without objection?
Correct.
141 in evidence without objection.
Now, in regards to states 140, what was already been admitted, did this indicate Miss Melanie Eam's, and was this affiliated with that same Toyota Corolla that became part of your investigation that you participated in the search of the day after the state?
Yes, just to clarify, there's a transponder that's associated with the vehicle, the Toyota, and this is the historical of that transponder through Sunpass.
And in addition to the historical information through the transponder, does it also show activity on the November 17th or early morning hours?
It does.
And does that include locations of West Palm Beach, both on and off of Palm Beach Gardens, going from Jupiter, as well as Three Lakes and Kissimmee, St. Cloud?
Yes, all in the northbound direction, West Palm.
And in addition to that, with the SunPass records, did you also retrieve a photo capture of Miss Eam in that white Toyota, of the individual going through in the white Toyota Corolla along the SunPass areas?
Yes, and it corresponds with the transponder.
And in regards to 141, are these the Bank of America records associated with the debit card belonging to Ms. Melanie Eam?
Yes. Yes, sir.
And are there two different withdrawals that are made on November 17th?
Yes, they're made in Long Beach Gardens.
And those are both the two 200 withdrawals at the garden shop,
Yes, ma'am.
as well as a purchase made in Yulee, Florida.
Yes, sir.
But in relation to the vehicle, I know you, crime scene investigator Perkins already testified, but were you present and did you collect swabs from her crime scene investigator Perkins when she processed the Toyota Corolla in Maryland. Did you collect those items and bring them back to the state of Florida
Yes.
to have submitted to the sheriff's office as part of your investigation?
Yes.
In relation to the case, one of the other aspects that did you receive assistance from a detective Barron in retrieving surveillance video from the Glasgow Drive from that street at another address?
Yes, a residence east of the victim's residence.
In regards to that address that was east, was it 16059 East Glasgow Drive?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you retrieve surveillance video with the assistance of other detectives from that location?
Yes.
And in relation to that, was that something that's collected into evidence as well?
Yes, it was.
Did that indicate, did you have, when viewing that, did you believe it was relevant to your investigation pertaining to prior to the homicide and immediately after the homicide relating to Miss Eam?
Yes, definitely.
In relation to, may I finish?
Yes.
I believe defense counsel has no objection to cases 144 through 148.
Correct.
Are you offering at this time?
Yes, Your Honor, at this time state will move the evidence 144 through 148.
144 through 148 in evidence without objection.
And in relation to these stills, they appear to be stills of a vehicle going down the street prior to the homicide, as well as then a vehicle leaving less than 30 minutes later.
Yes, ma'am.
And in this, are we able to see the full vehicle or just headlights in motion?
See the full vehicle and has a timestamp as well.
And in addition to that, we see that it's a white sedan type vehicle.
Yes.
I do not have any further questions for Justice Elliott at this time.
Cross-examination.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Hello?
In your training, are you supposed to gather as many details as possible in questioning a subject?
Yes.
Did you find it strange that when you tried to get details like number of times stabbed, she didn't have an answer?
Not necessarily strange, no, sir.
Did you find it strange that throughout your questioning, you got her yes to your questions, but no details from her?
I don't know if there were necessarily no details. She did give some details.
Okay, so was it you who asked the Maryland Sheriff's Office to go and do a welfare check on her before you got up there?
There wasn't particularly a welfare check, no, sir.
So if the detective or the officer who went up there and found the car, knocked on the door and said, I was asked to do a welfare check, it really wasn't?
What he said is his own words. I had only asked that they try to make contact with the CM.
Okay, did he report back to you?
Not directly, no, sir.
Did he report back to you indirectly?
It was conveyed to me through a superior on scene that they've made contact with the CM.
Was it conveyed to you that when he said, are you okay, she said, I'm afraid, or I'm scared? Was that reported back to you?
I didn't learn of those exact words until I actually got the download video of the body cam.
So you saw it?
I saw the body cam, yes.
She said to you, which was it? I'm afraid or I'm scared? Do you remember which?
I think she said she was scared.
Did you bother to inquire who she was scared of?
By the time I saw that, she had already been arrested.
At what point, if any, was Guy Hand a suspect in this homicide?
At no time.
So the fact that he moved the knife didn't bother you?
It didn't bother me because I can't expect a civilian in such a situation to do maybe what I would do, but everybody does things differently.
Even a civilian that lives in 2017 and watches TV?
I don't imagine he's ever seen anyone die before him, so yeah, it didn't alarm me.
Why do you take pictures of his hands and his belly?
We generally document anyone who's had contact with a victim or anyone who's been bleeding just to show that it's documentation. It's also the preliminary part of the investigation. So I do whatever I can, gather as much evidence before it's lost.
Did he wash his hand before you photographed him?
Not in our presence. I don't believe he had any time to wash his hands, no sir.
So if in the recorded statement you took of him, you said, please don't wash your hand, and he said, I already did, that was, how can that be?
Probably before deputies got on there. Deputies over law enforcement generally don't let anyone clean up. So probably, if he said he did before we got there.
He said to you that he did.
Okay.
He was so unimportant you didn't pay attention?
At that time, with everything on scene, all the interviews I did, it wasn't important.
Would it be accurate to state that he was the biggest finger pointer? Melanie Eam, Melanie Eam, Melanie Eam?
No, I would not say that.
Although his statement begins with her and ends with her, correct?
I don't know if it necessarily begins, he mentions her, yes, sir.
How does DNA work? Did you have those clothes analyzed for DNA?
The clothes that were recovered from the CM?
Yes.
Yes, sir. The shirt, I believe, long sleeve shirt has been examined by the lab.
And you have results?
I believe results were obtained, yes, sir.
Okay, and who decides what goes to the DNA lab and what doesn't?
It is a concert effort. It's the detective and also the analyst, because they know they have a better idea what they can get DNA from.
So when you say the detective, you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you decided what would be analyzed and what would not, correct?
In this particular case, yeah.
And what known samples are given to the DNA lab?
What do you mean exactly? What known samples? You took, in this particular case, you're saying what examples were given? Is that what you're asking?
No, what I'm saying is there's blood picked up from the knife, blood picked up from clothing, blood picked up from the car, and that gets compared to known samples, correct?
Sir?
So you gave them known samples of Melanie?
No DNA standard for Melanie Eam. We provided the victims James Berry's DNA standard, and then compared it to blood evidence that was found on Miss Eam's clothes and swabs from the vehicle Miss Eam drove.
So any comparisons done by the DNA lab were compared to the blood found on Melanie Eam and not Melanie Eam's blood?
Correct, Melanie Eam's blood was not used in the DNA scan or in the examination.
Looking at any of these DNA samples, nothing's 100%. Like one of them is 96% one, 4% the other. Another one is 88% one, 12% the other. You know what I'm talking about?
I would have to see the report, but I did review it, but I need to see what you're talking about, and I need to know what your question is.
The question is, wouldn't it be better to provide the samples and say, here's Melanie Eam's DNA, here's the deceased DNA, and here's Guy Hand's DNA, to know if this is a mixture? Wouldn't that be an intelligent way to do this?
Not related to the evidence that was presented or provided to the DNA lab for analysis.
You took DNA from Guy Hand, correct?
Yes, sir.
In fact, states exhibit number 127 is his DNA. May I approach?
Yes.
Correct?
This is 2 swabs of DNA from Guy Hand. Yes, sir.
I know from doing a case or two before this one, usually it gets, once it's opened, it gets resealed and then initials put on it. Was that ever opened?
No, sir.
Well, let me get this straight. You got DNA from Guy Hand and you stuck it on a shelf?
Yes, sir. I didn't say it on the shelf, let's put in the evidence, yes.
Figuratively, you stuck it on a shelf. Correct?
It was left in evidence, yes, sir.
You did not give it to the DNA lab, did you?
It was never asked for DNA analysis because his DNA was taken before the search of the residence was done. He had said he touched the knife. By the time we saw the knife, it wouldn't matter because there was so much blood on the knife, we wouldn't have been able to get any kind of DNA from it, other than probably the victims.
Well,
plus, we knew Mr. Hand lived in that residence and he touched that knife on a previous occasion.
as did Melanie.
Yes, sir.
Okay. What magic button? Did you fingerprint Guy Hand?
No, sir.
Sorry. Next one. If I may have a moment.
Maybe take her to the warm up.
Thank you. As opposed to the knife covered in blood, as we heard about it, this knife seems to have plenty of white showing on the handle, does it not?
It's white, but it's porous, which you can't lift a print off, and basically that's why.
Can you lift a print off of a stainless steel blade?
I believe the blade is covered in blood.
Did you try?
I did not.
Did you send it into the lab to try?
It was placed into evidence, and it has not been examined for DNA.
Explain the difference between placing something into evidence and giving it to the lab.
If it's placed into evidence, usually it has to be placed in evidence first, and then it's determined if that evidence needs to be sent to the lab, and in this case, this knife, no, it was not sent to the lab.
Needs to be sent to the lab. Wouldn't it be more accurate to say whether you want to send it to the lab as the lead investigator?
In this particular case, it was not determined to be that vital evidence as far as DNA processing.
Was this washed off by Mr. Hand before he left it on the counter?
I don't know if it was washed. There's nothing to indicate that knife was washed.
Sure, not completely covered with blood as you and everyone else seems to have described.
Objection, argument.
Overruled.
There's a void on the handle, probably because who was ever holding the knife when we stabbed the individual, we didn't see him. That's why there's a void on the handle, why there wouldn't be blood.
Wouldn't you want to know, all the blood all over the place, how much of it is the deceased, how much of it is Melanie Eam, and forgive me, but how much of it is Guy Hand's blood? Wouldn't you want to know that?
Well, the fact that Miss Eam was not injured, she didn't complain of any injuries. I saw it. She showed me her hands. I saw her. She had no injuries, so there would have been no blood evidence left by her. So no, sir.
Okay, so if there's a mixture of DNA on any of these items, wouldn't you want to know who the mixture is of? James Berry and maybe the real killer?
You're saying these items, you're not being specific, so I can't answer that question.
I'm approaching with the DNA. Please do not read from this because it is not in evidence yet. I'm sorry, if I could approach.
You may please.
Sorry. Without going into what the results are, this is not in evidence yet. You see one that's 96 and 4%, and you see another that's 88 and 12%.
Objection, scope of the witness, hearsay, lack of personality.
Well approached, sir.
Detective, as the lead investigator and the person who made the determination what DNA went to the lab for analysis, wouldn't it have made sense when you had blood sample from the inside of Ms. Eam's vehicle to say to the lab, here's the blood sample. Here is the DNA, here is the blood or the DNA or the spit or whatever you use of Guy Hand. He was there. Here is the blood sample or the spit or what have you of Melanie Eam, and have a true analysis of whose blood you're finding.
No. In this particular case, just having the victim's blood to see if it is, basically the items I've submitted, did you not explain which items, but the
I'm not
swab.
referring to that reporter.
Okay, so the items that were submitted to the lab was what we believe to be blood evidence, and to prove that Melanie Eam was involved in this in her car, and she went in the car afterwards. The blood evidence that we gathered only needs to be determined to be the victim's blood, through analysis.
Let's say, hypothetical, Ms. Eam is standing here. The victim is standing here. Guy Hand is standing here doing this. Wouldn't you want to know whose blood? Just the victim's blood doesn't tell what happened. Nobody else was bleeding. Of course, you can see on Guy Hand's hand there appears to be a cut. But wouldn't it make more sense for you to find out whose blood that is?
We did find out whose blood it was. It says it's James Berry.
And you don't care who that blood is mixed with.
I'm not allowed to refer to the report, so I can't answer that question.
Tell me generally, you don't care whose blood it's mixed with, do you?
I care that the lab was accurate in their analysis, and they're saying it's James Berry's blood.
So, if Ms. Eam was standing next to Mr. Berry when he was slaughtered and got his blood on her, that's enough for you to know. He has his blood on her, is that it?
Objection, speculation, and argument.
Trying to understand your question. You're saying the Guy Hand, you just said that you didn't say the Guy Hand stabbed him. There's no evidence the Guy Hand had any involvement in James' death. The evidence is Melanie Eam. Your statement. The request for this wasn't done until after I got a statement from her.
You've got on the scene a man covered in blood, a man who was handling the body, a man who was giving ineffective CPR for show, a man covered in blood, and a man pointing the finger, and you just dismissed him as a subject. I'm not going to investigate it. Is that what happened?
Yes, sir.
Sure looks that way. No further questions. May I retrieve the evidence, please?
Yes. And then read it.
First of all, with the sheriff's office, evidence lab and the sheriff's office DNA lab, is that all within the sheriff's office?
Yes, ma'am.
Does the DNA lab have the ability to retrieve evidence from sheriff's office evidence if it is in evidence?
Yes.
So this putting it on the shelf, not giving access to DNA, do they have access to all the DNA that's submitted in your case?
Yes.
In relation to when certain items are processed for DNA, you said that you can have a conversation with a person at the DNA lab to discuss items that are likely to have, to be able to yield results.
Correct.
In relation to that, do you have, not as to DNA, specifically as to DNA analysis, but in your training and experience, have you been, as well as within cases and the training that you've received, have you received information as to certain items with their ability as if they could be processed for DNA with success, likely?
More items than others, yes.
And in regards to, and you spoke of, if an item, such as a knife, has been handled by individuals at numerous other times, would that item necessarily, would it indicate when the DNA was on there?
No.
And is that something you know from your training and experience?
Yes.
And in regards to 68, state 68, and on the projection screen, it's a little additional light. But is there blood on this handle?
There's a little bit on the white, but more towards the blade, and
And then, but from this area right here, is that all blood on that side as well as over here? Does it look like blood,
yes.
red blood-like substance?
Yes.
And in regards to the blade, is there red, what appears to be red blood-like substance on the blade?
Yes.
And when you saw this knife, did it appear the blade as well as that part of the handle to be covered?
Yes, ma'am.
And based on your training experience as a law enforcement officer, in relation to DNA, if there is blood, from your training experience, can that affect, overwhelming amount of blood, affect the ability to seek additional DNA from that item?
Yes, ma'am.
In regards to the blood that was on the knife, as to your investigation, did everything indicate that that was James Berry's blood?
Yes, no one but James. Right?
And in regards to people being covered in blood, if people are providing first aid, holding down a chest stab wound, providing compression to an individual as they are dying, from your training and experience, is it common for a person to get blood on them?
Yes, of course.
In regards to Ms. Eam, did you observe any injuries on Ms. Eam?
No, she didn't report any either.
And so in relation to the blood, did you observe blood in the car?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you observe a blood-like substance on the shirt?
Yes.
Did you believe in your investigation, did you have an inkling or an idea of whose blood was on first the shirt, Whose blood did you think it was?
Mrs. Barry.
Objection, speculative, who he thought it was. It's irrelevant.
Objection, Gabby, you can hear your question. The blood on the shirt, Miss Eam's shirt, whose blood did you believe that was?
The victim, James Barry, that's because of,
And is that why you submitted James Berry's standard to be compared to that shirt?
yes,
The same in regards to the car, the blood that was located in the car, whose blood did you believe that to belong to?
James Barry.
And because of that, is that why you submitted James Berry's blood?
Yes.
In relation to Mr. Hand, when you were speaking to him, did you observe any injuries on him?
No.
Did you observe blood on his hands?
Yes.
In regards to the investigation, when you were on scene, I know you said you, in relation to when you're on scene, at the point in your investigation, when you're on scene and you speak with individuals, at some point that evening, do you indicate to them that there's a cell phone located when you're asking them where their cell phones are?
Yes.
And in relation to Miss Eam, when you spoke to her, defense said that she didn't give you any details. Did she give you details as to how and Mr. James Berry broke up with her and what he said?
Yes. She said he told her he didn't want her.
And in addition to those details, did she also tell you where she got the knife?
Yes, she said it was from the kitchen drawer.
And did she also indicate details of the fact that Mr. James Berry ran away?
She did say that he ran away after she said.
And in relation to the Maryland, Montgomery County Police Department, whether the first officer, when they approached Ms. Eam, whether they called it a welfare check, were they under any orders to arrest Ms. Eam?
No, they weren't.
At that time, was there still, prior to that point, had Ms. Eam's parents indicated to you their concern for their daughter?
Yes, they haven't heard from her, at least that's what they told me.
And in relation to these body camera videos, were you able to, as part of your investigation after the interview, able to observe the body camera videos from the Montgomery County Police Department, observe Ms. Eam's demeanor?
Yes, I did.
And based on that, your review of that, do you have any information as to the fact that they told her she was under arrest or told her that she was going to be detained?
None.
And in relation to Guy Hand, was there any evidence to indicate that Guy Hand stabbed James Berry?
No.
Throughout your investigation, was there multiple evidence pieces, as well as Ms. Eam's statement indicating that she stabbed James Berry?
Yes.
No further questions.
Dr. You may step down.
In relation to being on scene, I know that fire rescue responded and tried to assist James Berry. Was anyone else on scene treated for any injuries?
No.
No further questions.
All right, you may step down. State which fellow is looking for you.
Yes, the state calls Dr. Reinhardt. Okay.
Judge, no objection to any of the diagrams or photographs that the state is proposing.
You're offering them now, or do you want to wait?
I'll wait. I just showed it to you guys after the recording. Dr. Motte, if you would please introduce yourself to the jurors and spell your last name for the record.
My name is Reinhard Motte, M-O-T-T-E.
What do you do for a living, Dr.?
I'm a medical doctor. I specialize in forensic pathology. I work for Palm Beach County. I'm one of 6 doctors.
And working for Palm Beach County in forensic pathology, what does that mean?
We're basically like the CSI doctors. We are charged with investigating certain types of deaths and determining cause and manner of death. So homicide, suicide, accident, poisoning, suspicious deaths, things like that.
And so I know that you're a doctor, but are you a medical examiner?
Yeah, I'm a medical examiner. I've been a fully qualified medical examiner in Florida since July 1st, 1997.
And how, I know that you're a medical doctor, so what is your education and training in regards to first medicine and then your focus in forensic
Sure.
pathology?
I mean, originally, I grew up in Michigan. I went to Wayne State University in Detroit, got my bachelor's degree. Worked a few years, went back to medical school, became a medical doctor, and then spent 5 years at St. John Hospital Medical Center in the area of pathology. So pathology, we're the doctors that kind of figure out and study diseases. So for example, if you've got a breast mass, the surgeon removes it. We're the ones that figure it out. We also did some autopsies, and I had to spend time with the medical examiners in Detroit covering Wayne County. I got hooked on forensics. So then I came down, did a 6th year of specialized training in forensic pathology. I only do forensics. I don't do regular hospital pathology.
Judge, we are more than happy to, I know you don't tender to accept his opinion, his expertise, you name it. It's late, we accept it.
So,
I will do it as quick as I can. Dr. Motte, have you been a medical examiner in Florida for some time?
yes,
And has that included Palm Beach County as well as other counties within Southwood?
that's correct.
And how long have you been in capacity in Florida as a medical examiner?
Since July 1st, 1997.
And as a medical examiner, how long is back at the Palm Beach County Medical Examiner?
Going on 11 years or so. I retired in November.
And so in relation to your time at the multiple medical examiner's office, do you conduct autopsies as part of your job?
Among other things, yes.
What is an autopsy and how do you do it?
So basically, the autopsy is a 2-part process. The first part is where I examine a person, a dead person as is, and depending on the kind of death it is or what I suspect it might be, there's different things you do. You read about the overdoses, they're pretty straightforward. You do an external examination. In the homicide, for example, there are many more steps because you do a lot more documentation, a lot of photographs. For example, so that when I'm describing something, somebody else can look at my photographs and agree or disagree with what I'm trying to describe. And it's done for medical legal purposes. So there's a lot of external examination on the homicide, for example, including sampling things for DNA, trace evidence, and so on. Then the second part of the autopsy is where I take surgical instruments. I actually go inside. I look on the inside, everything from the brain. I look at neck organs, chest organs, abdomen, anything else that I need to look at.
And in relation to homicide investigations, is that something that you will oftentimes go inside the body to see the injuries and how they've affected the body?
Yes.
At the Palm Beach County Medical Examiner's Office, is there a type of procedure that is utilized when an autopsy is conducted?
There are general procedures, but every case is different, so you approach every case differently. There's some standards, though, that we follow in a homicide.
And at the Palm Beach County Medical Examiner's Office, do you have investigators that are often called sometimes to a scene if the deceased is still on a crime scene, or called to assist sometimes the hospital, or if a body is received by you, or there are investigators at your office that assist with the process prior to your involvement.
Yes.
And in regards to any autopsy that is conducted or any determination made by the Palm Beach County Medical Examiner's Office, is a case number assigned to each and every case.
Yes, it is.
I want to talk to you about Palm Beach County Medical Examiner case number 16-1798. Is that an autopsy that you conducted?
Yes, it is.
And in relation to this case, was this one where the Palm Beach County Medical Examiner investigator had been to the scene and made observations of the deceased prior to the body arriving in the medical center?
Yes.
Is there a procedure for when a body is taken from either a scene or a hospital and then taken to the medical examiner's office?
If it's a homicide or suspected homicide, yes, the body is placed in a sealed body bag. And there's a seal placed on it and signed off so no one can tamper with the body. The body's transported. We have an outside contractor that transports the body in that sealed body bag. And the body is transported to our office.
Now, in relation when the body is transported to your office, before the autopsy is conducted, do you then break the seal, make contact with the body, and confirm that the body is in the same condition as when it was placed?
Yes.
In relation to Mr. James Berry, you conducted autopsy the same very day on November 17, 2006.
Yes, I did.
As part of yours, and you briefly spoke about it, as part of your autopsy scope of documentation, does that include diagrams and photographs?
And photographs and printed out narrative.
In relation to when you begin the autopsy of Mr. Berry, is there general information that you determine, such as height and weight?
Things like that, yes. Those are actually measured by the more technicians.
And is that notated in all of your information as well as included in the diagrams?
Yes, I have them at 5'9", 129 pounds.
And so 5 tall, 9 inches, 129 pounds?
Correct.
As well as you also have an age of the deceased.
29, that was reported to me.
Is it?
I'm sorry, 21.
And at this time, state removed evidence of objection 142A through G.
No objection. 142A through
G.
A through G, in evidence without objection.
And Dr. Motte, at this time, Commissioner Publish
You may
142.
follow.
142A, is that the general diagram you do when you're conducting Mr. Berry's autopsy?
Right, that's one of several, but that's a basic diagram that we use.
And in relation to, in a case such as this, if you observe multiple injuries, do you then have separate diagrams you would use for, sometimes for each one?
Yes, I'll do that. It makes it easier for people to follow what I'm trying to describe and what I'm documenting.
Now, in relation to this diagram, is that where we can see the name and the case number we still have?
Yes, I have a copy of it in front of me, so,
As well as the height, weight, and age that you still have?
correct.
Now, first, when Mr. Berry, when you begin the autopsy, do you first make general observations of the victim as he appears to you in his clothes with his injuries?
Yes, just as is.
And at that point, are you able to notice any injuries on Mr. Berry? Well, case number we still have.
Yes, I have a copy of it in front of me, so,
As well as the height, weight, and age that you still have?
correct.
Now, first, when Mr. Berry, when you begin the autopsy, do you first make general observations of the victim as he appears to you in his clothes with his injuries?
Yes, just as is.
And at that point, are you able to notice any injuries on Mr. Berry while he's clothed?
Some of them, yes.
Is there a procedure, is the body then cleaned, and then do you make observations without the blood and without Mr. Berry's clothing?
Right, at some point the clothing is removed, whatever evidence is there, the body, after being examined, the wounds are washed off because blood just gets in the way of being able to look at wounds and injuries to be able to determine what kind of injuries they are.
And when you were, after the clothes and the body has been cleaned, were you able to observe any external injuries to Mr. Air?
Yes, he had several stab wounds. One, the lethal one up here, upper chest area on the left side. He had some what we call defensive type wounds on his fingers and on his hands. He had a stab wound on his right thigh, then a couple of smaller ones on his back, and then left side of his abdomen.
Now, in regards to these different injuries, you spoke of when first the general observations of the stab wounds. Did you then make diagrams and take photographs of each and every one?
Yeah.
In relation to this diagram that we see, do you make notations on this diagram of any of the injuries that you observed?
I just have some general notations on this. They continue on other body diagrams. Again, what happens is sometimes there's so many notes on one page, it gets kind of confusing, so then I roll it over into other body diagrams that you'll see.
Now, in relation to photographs, that same case number that we saw in 142A, do you use that same photograph, that same identifying number when you take additional photographs of the wounds?
Yes.
Is there also a picture taken of the victim with this case number so that it shows that this individual is attributable to all the other photographs?
We always do an identification photo.
This time, state with the evidence 150 acres.
No objection. Did you say A through J?
Yes.
So 150 A through J, evidence of objection.
And I'm showing you 150A. Is that the ID photo of Mr. James there?
Yes, it is.
With the same identifying number?
Correct.
Now, you spoke of, in relation to one injury, this time, state would also move to evidence 151A through G?
Without objection.
151A through, is it G?
Yes.
151A through G, evidence of objection.
Now, you spoke of one stab wound that you saw on the chest. Was that visible initially with his clothing?
Yes. And I knew about it too because I've already reviewed the scene photographs. We have morning rounds, just like in the hospital, they do rounds on the patients. We do rounds on our cases every morning with the doctors, the investigators, and the ward technicians before we start the day.
Now, at this time, I'm going to show you 142B. Did you prepare a diagram? Is that what we're seeing as the stab wound of the chest?
Yes, it is. That little curved thing you see on the upper left side of his chest.
And when you observed this wound externally, what did you observe about it?
It was a large gaping wound. There's some measurements I make, so he's 53.5 inches from his heels on out. It's just a few inches over, 2 inches over left over. And then there were some wound edges, for example. It wasn't just a clean stab. There's a little jagged edge in the middle, which tells me that there's some kind of movement. Either the knife is moving, repositioning, he's repositioning himself for moving, or maybe both.
And in regards to 150A, is that the wound that you described?
That's correct. It almost looks like a Nike insignia because the knife went in. At some point, there's a little bit of movement. That just shows you that. That's why it's a little jagged.
First, in regards to the measurements, you see the measurements in the diagram, but in regards to 151B, is that what we see there, doing the measurements of?
That's correct. Using a standard ruler.
And this wound, the measurements, are they what we see listed on this diagram?
Yes, they are. when I list them on the diagram though, the reason the wound is gaping open like that is we've actually got elastic fibers in our skin. So when they're cut, the wound contracts and opens itself up like that. So what I do is I put the wound edges back together again and I make my measurements like that. Because that's more of a true measurement than just a gaping hole like that.
And you spoke of jagged edges, and can you see that in 151C? What are we seeing here? Are you able to describe what you're seeing?
Sure, right at the bottom you can see that little tip line.
Yes,
See
and
the pointer
we have a
click
pointer.
down.
Your Honor, go get this one second.
Goodness, can step down.
There's a
You got it.
Yes, there's a
Just see this little edge right here? So you've got a stab, this little corner matches up with this. So it tells you there's a stab, right, to cut, but the knife is moved, or his body's moved, or maybe both of them have moved. And then the knife just cuts further, either comes out, and that's why you got this little jagged edge. It just tells me there's movement.
Now, in regards to this movement, is the injury that you see in the stab wound to the chest, is that consistent with the knife?
Yes, it is.
And you spoke of, in this regard, based on the size of the wound and the jagged edge, is that consistent with either the person moving or the person who holds the knife moving?
Either or both.
Now, in relation to this wound that we see, what is the injury, where is it in relation on the body?
Right up here on this diagram, I'm showing this little curve.
Now, if we say internally when you're looking at the damage to the body, what part of the body is that? You spoke of it being lethal. Why is that?
It's lethal. It entered his chest, so the knife actually hit the clavicle, which is his bone that comes across here on the first rib, and it entered into his chest. It cut through 2 blood vessels on the right side that are about the size of a number 2 pencil, and then it continued into his lung. And then those 2 blood vessels that were cut, they're now bleeding profusely. There's bleeding coming out of the chest. There's also a lot of blood that collects on the right side of the chest. So as the blood is filling up in the right side of the chest, it's putting pressure on the lung, so it's collapsing the right lung, putting pressure on it, and then pushing it over towards the left along with the heart.
Now, in relation to this wound, where it hit, would there be lots of blood coming out?
There'll be blood coming out of the wound, but also blood filling up inside of his chest, both of them.
Now, in regards to so that when you did the internal examination, was there blood inside Mr. Rivers' chest?
Yes, there was.
Now, you spoke of the clavicle and the first rib. In relation to your body, are those soft items, hard items?
No, they're very hard.
And that part of the rib, is that one of the stronger aspects of the ribs?
Yes, they are. Actually, of all of these ribs that are coming up here, where the 2 bones come together are the strongest.
Now, so that if a person were to use a knife and inflict that wound, would it be reasonable based on your scientific and medical experience that the knife may bend based on that?
It could.
Now, in regards to 150D, is that just a closer up of, is that just another closer up
Yes,
of
it
that
is.
same wound?
Yes, it is.
Now, in relation to, you spoke of blood going up in the chest based on this wound and the excessive blood. What would the effect on the body?
First of all, he's going to start having shortness of breath. Blood, because the lung has also been stabbed, so you're going to have some blood into the lung itself. Eventually what happens is as you're losing blood, you're not going to have enough blood pressure to keep your blood vessels open. And the blood vessels collapse, now you're not getting oxygen to the brain. Then you pass out, and then you just don't wake up.
Now, in regards to this, when your heart stops beating, what happens to the blood?
It just pools. It just sits there in the chest, and you stop bleeding.
Now, so that if a person, once they die, does their body stop bleeding all the blood outside the body?
If the body's moved around, some blood will still leak out of the chest area, for example. I mean, we have that problem sometimes too when we're moving the bodies around. But your heart's not pumping, so it's not squirting out, for example.
So if your heart stops pumping, does the blood stop flowing?
It stops flowing, correct?
Now, in relation to this wound, would it have been a fatal wound to Mr. Berry?
It is the fatal wound.
Besides this wound, and we spoke of it, and I'll show you the picture once more, in regards to this injury, was it a recent injury?
It's a fresh injury, yes.
And is there in this wound any sign of healing from the body?
No, no healing.
Now, in addition to that wound, you said that was the lethal fatal wound. Did you make observations of other injuries, other stab wounds on Mr. Berry?
Yes, I did, but those are not lethal.
Now, in regards to 142D, was that one of the additional stab wounds that you observed on the body?
Right, on his right thigh, sorry, I'll come down again. On his right thigh, what I've indicated here with this little line, it's about the location on his right thigh. And I also mentioned corresponding cut in his blue denim pants. So he's been stabbed through the pants.
And is that something you were able to see before the autopsy on the clothing, able to observe the clothes as well as once you observe the injury, confirm again with the clothing?
Right, I did.
Now, what was this injury?
It was essentially a stab wound about an inch deep into his skin and muscle.
And is that what we're seeing in 150B? First B, and then also C.
Yes, it is. And the way we position these, when you can read the number, the feet are towards the top, or toward the bottom, the head is towards the top. That's right on this right thigh.
Now, was this wound itself another recent injury at the time of death?
All around the time of death, all of these.
Did this injury have any sign of healing?
No.
And was this injury also consistent with the time?
Yes.
And how can you tell?
First of all, it's a sharp force injury, and one of the other clues that I look for, you can see this part right here. It's very sharp. That's where the sharp part of the knife is. You notice here there's a blunt end. It tells me the weapon at least has one side that's sharp, and the top on the opposite side, on the top of the weapon, it's flat. It's not sharp.
And this wound, what would the effect of this wound be on the body?
There's some bleeding associated with it, and it hurts. It's not lethal though.
Now, in addition to that wound, was there also a wound to the upper back that you observed during autopsy?
Yes, there was.
And in regards to 142E, is that a diagram of that?
Right, actually two of them. This line up here on his right upper back, and then there's a smaller one on the left lower back. So this is easy to put both of them on one diagram.
Now, in regards to the wounds on the back, first we'll talk about the one on the right upper back. What kind of injury was that?
It's just a stab wound. It didn't go very deep at all. Very, very small.
And at this time, statement of data was 152A through E.
152A through E, is A through E?
Yes.
Unanimous without objection.
And 152A, is that a photograph of that?
I'm pointing at it.
And 152B is just a closer up.
That's correct.
And in this, is this one also a recent fresh injury?
Yes.
At the time, at or around the time of death?
Correct.
Is there any sign of healing with this injury?
No.
In regards to this injury, was it also consistent with the knife?
Yes.
see, a closer up of that, is that just the effect on the body, just bleeding and pain?
It will just bleed and hurt a bit, yes.
But in the same way we spoke of the other knife wounds, that also is consistent with the knife wounds that you described previously, what you observed?
Yes.
In relation to the other wound, the stab wound on the left lower back that we see in 142E, that diagram, what type of wound is that?
It's just a stab wound, very superficial. 5 millimeters deep, maybe quarter of an inch, that's as deep as it goes.
And is that what we see in 152D?
Yes, that little dark area you see here, it's very small.
And the same, closer up in 152E.
That's a close-up, yes.
Now, is this wound also consistent with the knife?
Yes, it is.
Is it also a recent injury where there's no sign of pain?
Yes.
Now, this small wound, what would the effect be of that?
A little bit of blood loss. And it's everything.
And you also spoke of another, we referenced it in the larger diagram, but in 142C, did you notice, we spoke of the chest wound, but did you notice another wound on the front side of the stomach?
Right, just this abdomen, that's this little black line you see right here. And then there's this little triangular shape abrasion or scrape associated with it.
Now, in relation to this wound, was it consistent with time?
Yes.
Was it also in the same manner a recent injury closer to the time of death?
Yes.
Was the effect of this injury, was it just the blood as we had described?
A little bit of blood, a little bit of pain.
But nothing lethal about that?
No.
You spoke of wounds to the hand. Did you also observe those injuries to the hand?
Yes, I did on both hands.
First, in regards to the left hand, what we see in 142G, what did you notice about the wounds that you see in diagram 142G? What hand?
This is the back of the left hand, and I diagrammed a little 5 millimeter sharp injury, so it's coming across the hand. And there's this little tail, and then there's another one here on the inside of the left baby finger, incised wound, so it cut.
And did you also document those with photographs?
Yes, those are photographed. The more text is photography.
And 151E.
Right, you can see this, for example, you can see the injury here, but this is the one I was talking about. You see this little tail here, this little line? That's where the knife just comes barely across the skin.
And that's what you can see from what is on the left side of the wound.
Correct. Here.
And those injuries that we see on the left hand, on the front of his hand, close to his pinky finger, are those wounds also consistent with that?
Yes, they are.
And are they recent at the time of his death?
Yes, they are.
And this wound, is it consistent with someone either trying to grab the knife or trying to protect themselves?
Consistent with that, yes.
In relation to this, what would be the effect on the body?
Same thing again, a little bit of blood loss and pain. Not lethal.
And in regards to the opposing side, in 151F, what do we see?
Little baby finger, the pinky finger on the left hand. Right there, the red area.
And in 151G. Is that a closer up of that painting?
Yes, it is.
And what, can we see that the wound actually has cut the skin off and you can see the red inside?
That's correct.
Is this also, this wound consistent with the knife?
Yes, it is.
And is it also consistent with a fresh injury at or around the time of death?
Yes.
And in relation to those injuries, all consistent with the same type of knife wounds we have described in that records?
Correct.
And the effect on the body, would it just be?
Again, bleeding is okay, not bleeding.
Now, in regards to the other hand, did you also observe additional injuries to the other hand?
Correct.
And is that what we see in 142F?
Yes, it is. So there's this incised wound on the right index finger here. I'm showing that. And then what I'm showing across the back of the hand, there's a sharp injury there as well. And an abrasion right here, which could be from the handle or not. And the reason you'll see photographs with skips is because our hands are not a flat surface, they're round and bumpy a little bit. So as the knife comes across, it's coming across gently or not very deep, so it just cuts the surface of the skin in the areas where it goes down if it doesn't get cut, if that makes sense.
And in regards to 150D, is that, are we seeing the same wound in this photograph?
Yes, you can see these. Yeah, you can see these red areas, so that the knife will come across, hit the highlights or the high parts of the back of the hand. And there's a little abrasion here, which could be just from the handle.
And when you say the handle, you mean the handle?
Handle of the knife.
And in regards to the 150E,
It's actually a better photograph.
and what are we seeing?
Again, you see these, they're very superficial, these little cuts coming across like this.
And in between the superficial cuts that we see on the skin, is there also a bit of a marking consistent with that indicates to you that these injuries are consistent?
Yeah, it's a sharp force injury, it's consistent with the knife.
Now, in relation to these, are these all superficial wounds?
Yes, they are.
And 150, is that a closer up of the same hand that we're talking about, that is the injury in the right hand?
Correct. So that's right here. I'm showing it on my right hand. And then you see the superficial cut coming up across here.
And on the right side of that hand, is there another superficial cut?
Again, same, yes.
And all of these superficial cuts, are they all consistent with a sharp object or a knife?
Yes, they are.
And are they all recent injuries at or around the time of death?
Yes,
Was there also a cut to a finger on this hand as well?
correct.
Right hand.
Yes,
And is that what we're seeing in 150H?
yes, it is. So here,
And 150I, is that another vantage point of that same cut?
yes, it is.
And is this cut based on the transparency results of the
Yes, it is.
And can you tell that based on the same, how can you tell?
It's a sharp force injury.
And 150J, is that just from the other perspective?
Yes, it is. When the wound edges are brought together more, so they're not just gaping.
And do you do that, so in the previous one, we saw that they were gaping, you actually put them together so that you can measure the size?
That's correct.
Now, in regards to those injuries that we saw on the right hand, are those all superficial, non-fatal, non-lethal wounds?
That's correct.
In the same way, you spoke of the left hand, is the right hand, is that also consistent with a person trying to either take the knife or try to cover themselves?
It's consistent with.
Are they consistent with the knife?
Yes, they are.
In relation to your autopsy, did you although you found the fatal wound to the chest, did you continue to examine those other stab wounds to confirm that they were not fatal?
Those other stab wounds were examined as they are. They didn't enter anything vital. I still do a complete autopsy, so I still examine the brain, neck, the rest of the organs of the chest and abdomen.
Now, in regards to the rest of the body, minus the injury that was spoke of, the fatal wound to the chest, was there any other internal injury or illness to Mr. Berry's body?
He was healthy.
In relation to that, when you conduct a full autopsy, are you eliminating any other possible cause of death?
That's the purpose of doing a complete autopsy.
In addition to that, did you also perform toxicology to see if there were any drugs in the system or any other item that could have caused it death?
Those are performed by an outside laboratory, but yes.
But in your autopsy, do you receive those and then consider those in regards to your autopsy conclusions, and are they included in your report?
Yes, they are.
Did Mr. Berry have any drugs in his system?
None other than caffeine.
And caffeine, like soda or coffee?
I've got it in me right now.
That's right. So in regards to those, were you able to eliminate any other cause of death and confirm that the chest wound that you spoke of fatal, were you able to determine if that was the cause of Mr. Berry's death?
The stab wound of the chest was the cause of death.
And is that the first diagram that you spoke of and the injuries to the leg that you spoke of the large chest wound initially?
Yes.
In regards to your determination of cause of death, do you also determine the manner of death?
Yes, I do.
And what is a manner of death?
The manner of death, I have 5 choices: homicide, suicide, accident, natural, or undetermined. And in this case, because it was assaulted, I wrote it a homicide.
And so that the cause of death to Mr. James Berry's stab wound and the manner is homicide.
Stab wound of the chest is the cause of death. Homicide is the manner of death.
And I personally,
Yeah.
I'm approaching you with what has already been entered into evidence of State's Exhibit 12. Dr. Motte, all the injuries that we discussed, are they consistent with the type of knife or weapon that we see in State's Exhibit 12?
Yes.
And is that also in regards to the fact that you spoke of one side being flat when you spoke about one thing?
That's correct.
And is that what we can see on this knife that's in State's Exhibit 12?
Right. One part of it is sharp and the top end is flat.
I do not have any other questions for Dr. Motte.
Cross-examination.
Good afternoon, Doctor. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
With all of your education, Wayne State on med school, everything else you did, and everything you did in this autopsy, all the measurements, are you able to tell whether this stabbing attack happened one-on-one or whether there was a second person standing next to the victim at the time of the attack? Are you able to tell it?
No.
Good afternoon.
Okay, redirect.
No, that's
Doctor, you may step down.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, members, sir, we're going to go ahead and break for this evening. We're going to try the same time tomorrow morning at 9:45. I'll try to get my morning docket concluded by 9:30 as close to as I can. Follow the same procedure you have been following. Sign in downstairs. Come on up. Assemble on the 11th floor with the deputy should assemble. You should leave your notepads and also the transcripts right there on the chair or in front of you on the rear rail, whichever. Reminder, please do not discuss the case with anyone, including any discussions amongst yourselves about doing research. Do not listen to or read any news accounts of this trial. That said, we're going to release you for this evening. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Have a safe drive home, a pleasant evening. We'll see you here on Monday.
Yeah, you are. Thank you so much.
All right, Chelsea.